In today's episode of Future Tech, I speak with expert software engineer and chief software officer at Fitch, Derek Ferguson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. And today we're going to talk about building innovative software solutions for global success. I mean, everyone's been talking about AI and how they're using it for so many different things, right? Even I built like a new landing page for some brand the other day in like an hour using AI, right? What are some of the things that you've been doing with AI that other people might, haven't heard of or they haven't tried? Maybe they should.
Well, from a software management perspective, and specifically the management of software engineers, the use of AI for code generation, which you kind of touched on a little bit, not necessarily just by lay people, but by professional software engineers to see what sort of productivity boosts can come out of something like that. Something we've been extremely interested in and involved with. And we've tried a number of the different tools that are out there and had a fair degree of success with it. I think, it's been said the AI that we're using now is the worst AI that we will ever use. So it'll only get better from here. But we've already seen some pretty impressive productivity improvements.
Yeah, because this is still, early days, right? We talk about, I always tell people like, when electricity came out, it was on like one block, then one city, then multiple states and countries. And it kind of, so AI is going to be the same thing. It's going to be like piece by piece, iteration by iteration. Now, one of the things I noticed with coding, you mentioned specifically with AI, is that I particularly like a lot. I'm not the best I guess you would say commenter, like putting comments into my code and really kind of making it display nicely for other people to understand what my code is. So if I feed, a page into ChatGPT, let's say, and say, hey, can you clean this up for me and put some comments in and, it gives it back to me in a very beautiful kind of structured format that helps people understand what I was going for on that page. Is that something that you think is helpful to people that might not know how to do that, is kind of just getting that feedback from AI versus building it for them?
That is one excellent use case. There's also the very closely related use case where you inherit someone else's code and they didn't go through that exercise.
Right.
So you're doing the postmortem on it, so to speak, to figure out what is this code supposed to do. Explain this code is a very common prompt that we see a lot of productivity out of. Generating unit tests for code is also super helpful. You got to be careful, of course, because you can get unit test coverage with unit tests that exercise the code but don't have the right assertions to make sure that it actually passes. So, it'll go through and it'll make sure that everything in your add these two numbers function works, but it doesn't do the critical bit, which is making sure that 2 + 2 equals 4, right? But as long as you keep an eye on that, you can really boost the productivity in creating unit tests also.
And I've been seeing so much, I'm sure you and everybody else is kind of tired of hearing how AI is going to kill jobs out there. I mean, we're kind of already seeing, Fortune 500 companies laying off 1,000 people or 2,000 people or whatever because AI is now doing their job for them. So what do you see happening over the next 5-10 years with AI and software in particular?
So I hear this a lot.
I know.
Also, and I've always been optimistic about new technologies. This is no exception just because it's the most radical new technology that we've seen in, a number of years.
Yeah.
But I went back and I looked historically. So we've gone from back in the day, folks had to actually flip switches physically to program computers, right? And then they came up with this whole concept of assembly language. And at that point in time, there were folks who thought, all the programming jobs are gone. Obviously, computing didn't end in the 1940s, right? No, it's gone on. Same sort of predictions when C code came in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Far from it, that was actually the birth of commercial software. Before that, software was for, the military, aerospace, stuff like that. Commercial software with C. Then Java replaced C. Folks thought, this is going to be the end, but web, mobile, all that sort of stuff. So my perspective on the AI code generation revolution and just AI being able to do all this sort of stuff, what you're going to see is you're going to see software everywhere in the future, places we never thought would have functioning software applications. And with all of that additional code comes the need to maintain that code. And as good as AI is, you get to a point where in order to get it to do a very specific thing in a very specific way, or when it breaks, you need folks to maintain that.
Yeah.
So I think, when something new comes along, you always see that initial little bit of a dip, but then it comes back even stronger. So I remain not just long term, but medium term, extremely optimistic about what this will do for the future of our profession.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. I mean, you need humans, you need people with brains to actually manage what's happening, right? Because the AI itself, you give it, its prompt, and then it does what it does, but it stops, right? It doesn't continue on. Whereas we humans, we just continue on. We can keep coding and coding and coding using our brain and our thought process, right? And that's
Yes.
and I think that's the part that's missing that people have to realize. You still have to manage it. An airplane can't fly itself unless it's on autopilot, but it needs to have a pilot to manage that machinery, that software. So I feel like taking a step back, because it sounds like we both come from like a software background. Mine was college. I was in the birth of the internet, so I had to learn how to code web pages. What was your first, I guess the moment that catalyzed it for you, where you realized software was your thing that you really wanted to, embark on your career with, and what made you really love software?
We might be of approximately same ilk since I started my career with the birth of the internet also. So I grew up in the 80s,
Yep.
and my mom was a programmer.
Oh, cool.
And I don't
You
know
don't
if
hear that every day.
yes, no,
An
no, this
80s
is
mom as a programmer.
my mom was a programmer.
That's pretty cool.
And I think the turning point for me was probably the movie Tron, if
Oh,
you
yeah,
remember that.
of course. Hello, Jeff Bridges.
Yes. So suddenly my mom's job became super cool,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I want to get into that motorcycle, right?
You got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
So,
cool. So that was the
yeah,
motivation, was a really cool movie or a video game turned into a movie. So that's cool. I can appreciate that. For me, it was more the fact that, oh, I can put my business or my idea onto a page that I can send to people to look at elsewhere. Something about that really just made me kind of think like, oh, I don't have to hand this business card to someone anymore. I can just say, hey, go to da-da-da.com and check it out, right? And sell something on there. Like, I was like mind blown that I could buy or sell things on this new thing. So that's really what kind of made me really love the internet and software in particular. So let's take a moment to talk about something that I noticed in the notes that maybe not everyone's familiar with. So we should probably let you give us some expertise. DevOps transformation. Like, tell me the secrets behind a successful DevOps transformation.
yeah. So today is actually I should say this is November 20th, and they just came out with the 10th annual DevOps Readiness Assessment Report. I literally got it 15 minutes before this podcast. So
Oh,
I
wow.
haven't had a chance to read it yet, and it's burning a hole in my brain because I want
Talk
to take a
about
look at
relevant.
it.
Oh, don't worry. You'll be there in a few minutes.
This is so the exciting thing about this is the report, the survey that Google does of this year. It looks like it's 39,000 organizations
Mhm.
to find out where they stand on what has historically been four key metrics surrounding how quickly organizations ship software from the time that the requirement comes in until the time they get a piece done, how often they have outages as a result of shipping that software, how long it takes them to resolve the outages, so on and so forth. Um, what we have found is that, like many organizations, chasing those four metrics drives the best practices that are needed for DevOps excellence. Because if you're really focused on, you hear like organizations like Amazon, Netflix that do thousands of releases per day, in order to get to that point, you have to get a lot of other things right,
Yeah.
like automated testing, like security scanning, all of that sort of stuff. That shift left in developer acumen has to be in place in order to hit those metrics. So if there's one thing that I would really put in front of your listeners to focus on,
Hmm.
check out the DORA metrics.
Okay. And where can they find out more about that? Is there a website or?
There's an excellent book called Accelerate. Primary author was Dr. Nicole Forsgren, but there's a few other authors on it. That is sort of like the Bible of DevOps readiness.
Okay. everyone check that out if you're interested. I mean, I'm always, fascinated. I develop software all the time with my team. And one of the things that, in terms of our best practices that I'm very kind of like a strict coding nerd on is having a staging server and a live server to like really make sure things work properly before they get pushed to production. And, a lot of people don't do this. There's a lot of startups out there or a lot of, entrepreneurs that just build, push, we do the GitHub pipeline to make sure things get automated. And there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. And do you recommend people splitting the server up in that way to do proper testing before it goes live, or do you not always have to do that?
In an ideal situation, if you have the acumen where your business can review test cases and say with certainty that the test cases express what they need in terms of positive functionality in what you're building, and if you have a good enough automated regression testing suite that you can be confident that when you push something, it's not going to break anything else.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't, but how many of us actually live in that world, right?
Yeah, not many.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Yeah, I think the answer is in practical terms, I think you hit the nail on the head. In a theoretical construct, yes, maybe not.
Are there any other pieces of advice you would give new starting software engineers besides that they should implement in their daily routine?
I think the what has been said, trying to tie back a little bit to our initial topic around AI, has been said. AI won't take your job, but someone who knows AI better than you may.
Good point.
So dig in, understand the fundamentals, the mathematical underpinnings of large language models, not just how to write good prompts, but what is actually happening under the hood.
Yeah.
That will give you the edge on your competing software engineers.
Cool. And I noticed something else before we wrap up, ESG principles. Can you explain that to the audience and how that fits into your workload?
Well, there is a way of looking at software and the cost of running software, which is not just the traditional, how much money is it costing us to build it? How much money is it costing us to buy the CPU and the memory and all that sort of stuff? Mm-hmm. But what are things like carbon emissions that come as the result of running our software? There's a really interesting thing you can pull up on if you Google it that compares the carbon footprint of using different kinds of languages. And to the chagrin of many of us, Python is something like 3,000 times more carbon producing than Java, which is 1,000 times more carbon producing than C or whatever, which of course is an efficiency measure. But
makes sense.
When you think about ESG and software, think in terms of, and depending upon what cloud provider you're using, most of them have tools now that will allow you to go in and estimate the carbon footprint of the software you create.
Nice. Well, that's good. And people should be cognizant of that for sure. And the last question I have for you, really, it's something that people always ask is like, what do you think the future holds for software development in general? I mean, you talked about the evolution of, software, but what do you think is going to happen over the next decade or so?
Next decade or so, I would look for a lot of the tasks that software developers have never liked to do to go by the wayside and to be handled by AI. And then I would expect, based on what has happened in previous revolutions in software engineering like now, we will see completely new applications for software that we never thought, like I said, software running in places we never expected it. And then you will see you will see more tasks coming in that we never thought of necessary. I use the analogy going back to what you said about starting your career at the start of the internet. When I graduated from university, my graduation project was the creation of a web page.
Same here. That's exactly what I had to do too. That's what I was. Yeah.
Because you had to handcraft the HTML, right?
Yeah, but from scratch, right?
I tell our university recruits who join Fitch, 10 years from now, in a morning, you'll be expected to create 5 applications.
Right, like an actual functioning app or something.
Exactly.
With a database,
Yeah, it's because whatever we have, our expectations grow even more. So that's the good news and the curse, both, I guess, right?
Yeah. Good point. And if people want to find out more about what you guys do, or if they want to join you or talk to you, how would they get a hold of you?
check out our careers page, please, careers.fitch.group.
Awesome, guys. Check out careers.fitch.group. Hopefully you learned something about software and AI today, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.